Hello, this is Matt Levine with SHB 450 Video Reflection 4 for Chapter 6 and 7 of Do Hard Things by Steve Magnus. Starting out with Chapter 6, Number 1. According to Magnus, why is quote-unquote listening to our emotions essential to true toughness? So there was a couple different spots where he briefly touched on this. The first, before he directly addressed that exact quote, was on page 117. Where he talked about emotions moving us from nudging us to do something, or nudging us to approach a problem, or nudging us to have a conversation with somebody that we want to shoving us to. And it's our first step towards action. First step towards taking that toughness approach, towards taking that leap of faith. Where he directly addressed this quote, it's on page 120, where he said they are telling us important info. So listening to our emotions is essential to true toughness because they really are those indicators. They really are those things that kind of help our body predict what's going to go. They kind of help us formulate exactly what problem we're facing and how we should approach it. So they really tell us the important info. For number 2, about the European studies, that happened on page 137. And the individuals who were clear about their feelings and had that better source of understanding with their feelings and emotions were better able to thrive and work through anxiety. This is something, actually, come back from spring break last week, I had a pretty relatively deep conversation with a couple of my friends that we were driving with about anxiety, and that's something I personally have never struggled with. They each had different instances where they struggled with it, but I personally have never run into a problem or a period where I've really been anxious. I do attribute some of that to having some emotional intelligence. So, kind of growing up in this era, there's been a lot of emphasis on education about acting on your feelings and having emotional intelligence, which I think really has equipped me well. And I'm sure there will be situations down the road where I'll need to rely on my emotional intelligence and, kind of process my way through problems better, more efficiently to avoid being anxious, or if in a situation where I do go through periods of anxiety or some other mental block, to kind of take a step back and be more in touch with my feelings so that I can get through that problem. So for number 3, the quote, finding clarity in feelings and emotions and understanding them as messages is something that and giving clues to what the body is predicting. That's something I really never thought about, is my emotions, my feelings give an example of what the body is predicting. So I'll use the example of basketball and conditioning. This past winter, coming back from winter, and we had 3 days off during winter, so I didn't really think it was needed. But my body predicted, in a sense, how tough the conditioning was going to be, or how tough the sprints we had to do were going to be. And that helped me be one of the top 3 performers in the conditioning. And I am by no means one of the top 3 fastest guys in the team. But I think my emotional intelligence, and also having done it before, gave me a leg up to where my body knew what to expect. My body was able to predict and anticipate the stresses that would be on me, and really, really toughen me up for what was needed. And I didn't have to blindly push through. It was more of a, okay, I know what's going to happen. I know how I'm prepared for this mentally and physically. And it went well. I was one of the top 3 performers in the conditioning. I think that was one of my biggest attributes during that time. So now moving on to Chapter 7. According to Magnus, researchers define 2 types of inner dialogue: integrated and confrontational. How does he describe / differentiate these two? So this was found on page 147. Integrated is less of an inner debate to win or lose. I think he used the example of Ali versus Frazier. It's not that. Confrontational is more of that, but we'll get into that in a second. It's not about winning or losing. You have the 2 voices kind of going at you, and they're both just trying to walk you through a solution, or walk you through a problem to find a solution, taking different viewpoints. So it could really be anything. It could be how I'm going to approach a paper. One says do it all week, paragraph by paragraph, and then you don't have to rush through it. And the other viewpoint is procrastinate it all, get ahead in your other classes, and then last minute before the paper's due, write the paper. They're not trying to win. They're just trying to give you viewpoints so you can be better educated, make a better educated guess. So confrontational, like I said, is more like the Ali versus Frazier fight, more like the Balboa versus Creed fight, where somebody's trying to win. Voices represent different quote-unquote selves, it said, which I thought was interesting. Like you have your yourself when you go route A versus yourself when you go route B. Which one's better? And duke it out to death. And it's something where, you know, going forward, I'll kind of have that retrospective mind in, like, okay, am I looking at this trying to find the best solution where I'm walking through two viewpoints rationally, or am I going about this where one viewpoint is literally going to have to beat up the other viewpoint to where I want to do it? So that's just something I kind of like that. I like the metaphor and the example of the boxing he gave. For number 2, completing the following sentence: whatever form our inner dialogue takes, we have control over how we react and engage with it. That would be the exact quotes. Number 3, in one section of chapter 7, Magnus describes the fatigue, discomfort, and the pressure of obtaining only one of the 4 spots to qualify for nationals, and talking about how he didn't push through or power through, he processed through. You know, when I was reading this, I brought it back to my LSAT, law school admissions test, studying, to where I took a diagnostic test before I started any official prep, and it, you know, I obviously didn't do very well. It's before you start any prep, you're not supposed to do well on it. And kind of the conventional study strategy, I guess, is to it's like I bought a study course, 7-stage, and I had this whole big syllabus with hundreds of lessons about different topics, and all the 3 main topics. So there's logical reasoning, reading comprehension, and logic games, and then one of them is repeated on the test, so you have 4 total. But there's obviously, I didn't just power through the entire syllabus, they called it, on 7-stage, where I would watch every video, go through every lesson. I didn't do that. I kind of had some self-awareness and mentally processed, okay, I have June 10th, I'm taking the exam. I started studying in late December. That means I have a lot of time, and, you know, it just doesn't make sense for me to have useless days of studying where I'm just going to go over something I'm already pretty good at and already pretty competent at. So I used I thought of processing through and using my time more efficiently, rather than just, okay, I'm going to put in 4 hours every day. I'm going to I'm going to get through every video on there. I'm going to get through every problem on there. It was, okay, I'm going to do an hour and a half today. I'm going to do 2 hours tomorrow. I'm going to do an hour tomorrow. And then this day, I'm really struggling with this concept. I'm going to do 3 hours that day. So it was kind of knowing myself. And I think that's something Magnus did in that race too. He knows himself better than he thought he did, and he realized it mid-race. I'm sure there's numerous examples in my life where I'm not thinking of where I did not know myself as well as I should have, and I did just power through it rather than process through. But the specific example of studying for the LSAT, I know myself. I knew I wasn't going to sign up for 4 hours of studying a day on top of 18 credits and playing collegiate basketball. It's just not something that's going to happen. So kind of getting that self-awareness of, I'm good at this, I'm not good at that. This is easier for me to study. This is harder for me to study. This is easier for me to keep my focus. This is harder for me to keep my focus. And really processing what I do well, what I don't do well, and knowing myself. And, you know, maybe that was the emotions and the feelings that I had coming into it. Maybe that played a role in predicting how I would respond. I'm not sure. But, yeah, I really liked Chapter 7 and the example of a drift that he started with the captain and crewman, who was just one person who took the different viewpoints in his head to survive 76 days in the ocean. That was a great example I'd never heard of before, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what other lessons I can take from this book. Thank you.